And when he speaks, people listen, and there's a lot of power in that. And on top of that, he has a lot of sage advice, to young fighters coming up. He's also has a very deep understanding of the history of the sport. He's studied the all-time greats of the past, which is something that I think a lot of the young fighters are really lacking these days.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is time for Boxing Scenes Top Stories here on ProBox TV, your boxing channel. I'm George DeMatteis. Don't forget to download the ProBox TV app, where apps are available as the total experience you can get on the app, including Wednesday night fights and the great insights from our world champions. We have Chris Algieri and we have Paulie Malignaggi joining us here on Top Stories. Well, Mike Tyson has come out with some thoughtful and insightful takes on the world of boxing, contending that he wants to see Errol Spence get back in the ring because great champions get off the canvas. And he added that he has no interest in seeing Canelo fight Terrence Crawford because Crawford barely won at 154. How can he compete at 168? Now, Chris, isn't this the position we want to see Tyson in, as this smart kind of sage, seen-it-all ambassador who can weigh in on boxing instead of the person at 58 years old who's going to step into the ring against Jake Paul?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's an elder statesman in our sport. He's a fantastic fighter who moved the needle for a very long time. He's an absolute superstar in the sport. And when he speaks, people listen, and there's a lot of power in that. And on top of that, he has a lot of sage advice, to young fighters coming up. He's also has a very deep understanding of the history of the sport. He's studied the all-time greats of the past, which is something that I think a lot of the young fighters are really lacking these days. Guys don't know fighters from 10, 15 years ago, let alone 20, 30, 40, 50, the way that Mike does. So, any sport that has someone like Mike Tyson who can dig back into the crates the way that Mike can, right off the top of his head, I think is a vital influence for a lot of the young fighters coming up today. And in terms of what he's saying specifically about Errol Spence, I want Errol Spence to get back in the ring as well. I'm not sure he's going to be, the same fighter that he was. Again, age matters. He is aging. He's had a lot of miles put on his tires, so to speak. But I do want to see him fight back and get back in the ring. I want to see that Fundora fight. I want to see him get in the mix at the 154-pound division to see what he can do with some of these young bucks there, because it is a very exciting division. Also to see him get away from welterweight, which obviously he was hurting himself to make for many, many, many years. Possibly 54, he could be more successful, even at 160, because that's a pretty barren weight class. And in terms of the Crawford-Canelo fight, I think a lot of people, especially boxing people, are in the same mindset as Mike, is that if they're not really that interested in that fight, especially boxing heads, but it is a crossover fight where a lot of money and eyes will be there for that. In that case, listen, I want Crawford to get paid. I want him to get paid the money he deserves. He spent a long time of his career not making those big-time dollars, and someone who's as skillful and as good as he is, I think he deserves it. So if he can get that fight, I wouldn't be that mad at it. But in terms of actually watching it and wanting to see that fight, I don't care that much.
Yeah, I'm not exactly crazy about that fight myself. But, in terms of going back to the Mike Tyson effect, anything he says, it does move the meter a little bit. People listen more when Mike talks. Mike still has that presence about him where, people want to know his thoughts on boxing. If Mike probably did a show on boxing, I know he has the podcast that he has, but if he did a show on boxing, I'm sure a lot of people would tune in and listen, because he's a guy that who again moves the meter in terms of his opinions on boxing. It's not always that he's going to be right, but he's known as a knowledgeable, astute guy in boxing, and obviously he has the presence of being the former undisputed heavyweight champion and one of the most famous ex-fighters on the planet. So,
he's one of the most famous people on the planet, Paulie.
Yeah, you're right.
Literally one of the most famous people, not even just fighter, not even just athlete.
You're right. Good point. Great point. And I think for that reason, you probably prefer not to see him fight if you're familiar with boxing at this level and the aging process, what the boxing does. But look at what he can do, the possibilities that he can do, because his knowledge of boxing and even his thoughts on boxing are something that generates opinions and generates attention. Look, he had some thoughts on some things, and we're here talking about it right now. And I'm sure people are going to react to what we think about what he said, and also they're going to react to what he said as well. So, I think Tyson's place at this point, he's again one of the most famous people on the planet. But as far as fitting into the boxing realm, I'd love to see him, just do shows and give more of these thoughts and give more of these reflections. He's also a really big historian. When he was coming up in Cus D'Amato's place, Jim Jacobs had that old boxing library. Mike Tyson can talk about old school fights like no other, so you can, you get him into one of those conversations. It's a lot of cool tidbits that you could probably see Mike fitting into in the world of boxing in terms of conversational points and whatnot, if he'd want to. And I think that's where we would still keep loving him and getting to see more of him if he does stuff like that. But the reflections of Mike as far as Errol Spence is concerned, I'm curious about Errol. I mean, I'm kind of indifferent on whether he comes back or not, because I'm not sure what version of him still exists. He's fighting once every leap year at this point. So,
Yeah.
I mean, who knows? He could have already been shot by the Crawford fight and we didn't know it, which means he would have, was he good before that, which was like 2 years before that or a year and a half before that, whatever it was. So, honestly, sure. I mean, if Spence comes in and fights, I'll watch it, but do I want to see a guy fight once every leap year to where I can't tell where he's going to be at and what kind of version of him is going to show up? No, I don't. And if these guys going to choose to do that, I'd rather, see somebody else. I'd rather because TV dates are scarce and TV dates are what they are. You're not going to add more TV dates just because a certain guy is there. You're gonna wind up having to use a TV date that you could have given to somebody else. So if there's a guy who's going to fight once every leap year, I'd rather him not fight, and other guys who are coming up the ladder and making great matchups head to head, that money be spent and those dates be given to guys like that. So those are my thoughts on that. But again, the fact that Mike's giving opinions on it is going to generate opinions from other people as well.
Regardless of everything we just said, I don't want to see Mike fight. I don't want to see him do an exhibition. I don't want to see him do anything. The Roy Jones exhibition was 3 years ago, and that was fun. It was nostalgic. But guys, it was a sparring match. I don't want to see him fight anybody. And at this point, I don't think he really needs to be doing that. And I think exactly this position that we're talking about right now, being the elder statesman of the sport and being a boxing historian, doing shows, doing interviews, doing documentaries, he's perfect for that.
Yeah, his podcast, Hot Boxing with Mike Tyson, is his podcast, and he has that fight November 15th against Jake Paul. I'm with you guys. I don't want to see him step in the ring there. He's 58 years old against a guy who's less than about 30 years younger than him. So we'll see what happens. It's already been delayed once because of an illness there. So we'll see if it actually takes place November 15th. But if it does take place, of course, we will talk about it and give you all the information you need here on Top Stories. We'd like to remind you to scan the QR code, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And don't forget to download the ProBox TV app, where you can watch the best live fight series in all of boxing. Wednesday night fights, another edition October 9th. Should be fascinating. Another great card here on ProBox TV, your boxing channel. I'm George DeMatteis, and this is Boxing Scene's Top Stories.
Wednesday night fights.
Dynamite action on Wednesday night fights every other Wednesday on your boxing channel.
Coming up on your next Wednesday night fights, October 9th. Chris, Primetime Colbert, and Omar Super Salcido step into the ring for what is sure to be a barn burner. Live from the ProBox Event Center in Plant City. Get your tickets at ProBoxTV.com or take your chances at the door. Wednesday night fights.
For more ProBox TV, scan the QR code on the screen or go to the App Store and Google Play. ProBox TV, your boxing channel.